It's all about nutrient efficiency, right?
Exactly.
I've taught you all the things that you know.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
I'm Sherry Cook. I'm passionate about helping farmers with crop nutrition, and I'm here to help you with your operation.
Good morning and welcome to the Big Iron Farm Show. I had to fight a little fog to get our way here this morning. Even in town, I thought it was a little bit crazy to see how thick things were. My name is Don Wick. Our team here from the Red River Farm Network, we're proud to put on these forums each year. And if you folks want to catch up on all of our forums, you can go to our YouTube channel, and we post them on our social media as well. So if you miss any of our sessions, take note of that. We got a great program this time around. I love it because it's really at that nexus of what's happening in politics and policy and price. And that's a great place to have that conversation. John Newton with us, Chief Economist with Terrain Ag. You got quite a resume, John. Chief Economist of the Senate Ag Committee, American Farm Bureau Federation, National Milk Producers. You were economist at USDA before that. So quite the tag you've got. Your LinkedIn profile goes to more pages than mine, I'll tell you that, first of all.
That's what Brian just told me. He says, you got another logo on your shirt now. I've been doing this quite a long time.
Well, we're excited to have you here and to have this conversation. When you break through all the noise and all the stuff that's going on here, for this audience, whether it's in policy or in the market focus, what's the biggest thing you're seeing that's hitting these guys today?
I thought we were only doing easy questions, Don. To be honest, over the last 3 weeks, I've been to the White House twice to try to answer questions about what's happening in the farm economy. And they're very concerned about the lack of soybean purchases by the Chinese. They're concerned on how long can the Chinese wait us out? How long of a runway do we have? We know we export 70% of our soybeans to China between November and April. They're concerned about the one big beautiful bill, when that money's going to actually hit farm country. So again, over the last 3 weeks, that's been the single biggest issue that I've had to talk about.
Paint that picture for me. What's it like to be in the White House and having that level of conversation?
Well, it's, quite frankly, it's an honor to even be called to come in and provide that type of information. I mean, when you think about you're briefing the National Economic Council, you're briefing the Council of Economic Advisors, and they hear from Deputy Secretary Vaden, they hear from Secretary Rollins, but they're asking Farm Credit to come in the room and talk about what they're seeing and hearing from customers. It's an incredible honor.
You mentioned one big beautiful bill. There's a lot of things in there for agriculture with what's going on with the reference prices, some updates on crop insurance, some of the tax implications, probably the biggest story out of that. But we still need some other things done with Farm Bill 2.0 or the skinny Farm Bill. What's the outlook? What are you seeing on that horizon?
Well, I think farm groups right now are doing fly-ins. I think the corn growers are going to be in Washington, D.C. Next week. You mentioned some of the farm bureaus are doing fly-ins this week. National Farmers Union doing fly-ins this week. And at those fly-ins, they're meeting with their members of Congress to talk about what their priorities may be. And I know talking to farmers around the country.
Good morning, Big Iron exhibitors and guests.
One of the biggest things that I've heard about for Farm Bill 2.0 is we need to get the loan limits raised in these FSA programs.
Drawing will be at 4 p.m.
We've seen, I need to get in this drawing.
Just win the 50-50 drawing. You might be better off altogether.
Well, we bought Powerball tickets, and that didn't. I probably wouldn't be here if we'd hit the Powerball. But loan limits. I mean, inflation's been historic in farm country the last few years, and they have not revised the loan limits since the 18th Farm Bill. So you think it's elements like that that could be in a skinny Farm Bill. There may be other items that Chairman Thompson or Chairman Bozeman are looking at to add to a skinny Farm Bill, but they've got to get support. You need 60 votes in the Senate to get a farm bill over the finish line. You got to get support from both Republicans and Democrats to do a skinny farm bill. And farm bills are typically pretty bipartisan, so hopefully they can get it done.
Current one would expire at the end of this month. That's not going to happen, though. Do you think it's probably going to be extended again?
I think that, they look at the farm bill expires at the end of this month, but really it's, the ARC PLC programs, your dairy programs, they typically look at the end of the year as kind of that point where you have to get a new farm bill done. So I think even though it expires, they've got, the rest of the year to try to get something done or do an extension for a short amount of time if need be until you can get a full 5-year reauthorization over the finish line.
Are you optimistic that could be done before the end of the year?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Chairman Bozeman, Chairman Thompson are thinking about it now. Their staffs are hard at work thinking about that next farm bill and what exactly needs to be in it and working with leadership on the timing of when to introduce it.
Talk to me about the politics that are at play, because the majority is, the margins are just so thin, and even to pass any farm bill, there's an element within the Republican Party that's not going to vote for it. There's some on the Dem side the same way. So to be able to pull all of those farm state votes in and beyond, it's a big lift.
It is a big lift, but when lawmakers come home and they hear from farmers about what needs to be done, that motivates them in Washington, D.C. And I think one of the best examples was, as at the end of last year, as they were considering the American Relief Act, before President Trump was sworn in, farmers across the country said, we need emergency relief. Crop margins had been at or below break even for several years in a row. Farmers had experienced multiple years of catastrophic natural disasters. And Chairman Thompson and Chairman Bozeman came out and said, we will not support this bill unless it includes disaster aid for farmers. And the Farm Bureau came out and said the same thing. Farm Credit wrote a letter supporting that. And it was because of what they heard when they were back home, what was happening in farm country, that they were motivated to do that. And then you move into the One Big Beautiful Bill, and for years and years and years, farmers have been coming to Washington, D.C. saying we need updated risk management tools as part of the Farm Bill. The risk management tools that they have today were last updated in 2012, and Republicans have been trying to do that. Chairman Thompson got a bill, a bipartisan bill, out of committee, but it was because of what they heard in farm country that they were able to get a historic investment in risk management tools as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So lawmakers need to hear it when they go home. They need to be continually motivated to make sure that the interest of farm country is well represented.
There are those provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill that will kick in 2026. The Deputy Secretary Vaden was at Farm Progress just a couple weeks ago, and he brought up the idea of bridge payments of some sort, some type of bridge to get them into 2026. That's the first I heard of it from anyone in the administration. Mm-hmm. But it seems like there's been support, at least I've heard Thune talk about it. Both Bozeman and Thompson have had some talk on it as well.
I mean, even, Senator Grassley's even said that we need to do some sort of bridge payment. But, I think what Congress, what the administration, what the White House, what everybody's trying to do is, see what tools are in the toolbox, evaluate the need. Is it, do we need to be strategic? Are there certain sectors of the farm economy that are under more stress than others that need a bridge? So I think they're in an information finding mode at this point. Chairman Thompson's mentioned using tariff revenues as a potential offset for any type of bridge payment. People look at the Commodity Credit Corporation as another opportunity. So again, I don't think there's an answer just yet. But trust me when I say that the department, the White House, and members of Congress are thinking about a potential bridge.
So going back to the political reality of margins being so tight politically in Congress, we've gone to that well. Is there any concern about making that ask again, that we continuing to ask for some help?
Well, I think that is the challenge, right? Because in the American Relief Act, in early 2025, you had $30 billion in support for economic disasters and catastrophic natural disasters. Then you build that support again for the One Big Beautiful Bill that had $66 billion in support. For folks that don't understand how that works, even on Capitol Hill, they look at the $66 billion and they may say that's the win. But what they don't understand is those ARC and PLC enhancements, those won't hit farm country until October of 2026, which is fiscal year 2027. The improvements to crop insurance won't be effective until next spring or next fall if you're doing maybe a margin-based area plan of insurance. So it took a lot of support to get it over the finish line, but I don't think a lot of members of Congress understand that the actual benefits to farm country are a long way away.
So how do you get that message out, just because it's complicated in farm country telling that story?
Well, and that's in 2 visits to the White House over the last 3 weeks, we talked about that. We said, look, you made improvements to ARC and PLC. It's going to deliver more support for corn growers, for soybean growers, but they're not going to get that until October of next year. That's after next spring when they put another crop in the ground. That's after midterms. So the politicians are thinking about all the calculus and trying to figure out, if we do a bridge payment, what does it need to look like? And then, oh, by the way, they're also trying to get Farm Bill 2.0 to move at the same time.
I would note, we got a microphone out in the crowd. If anybody has any questions, give us a wave, and we always think the best questions come from the audience itself. A lot of these ills would be cured if we were able to get a price. If we were seeing China back in this market, and we actually had a bid for our soybeans, those things would make probably sell a lot more of that big equipment before the show was done. Talk to me about the tariff strategy and how you see it happening at this point.
Well, I think the tariffs have worked to the extent that you've seen deals with the European Union, with Japan, with other countries, with Canada, with Mexico. But where we haven't seen anything yet is with China. And where that hits hard is soybeans. And just like in 2018, 2019, they stayed out of the market. They've stayed out of the market now. I think right now, new crop soybean export commitments are only about 300 million bushels. That's the lowest it's been since 2018-19. And again, China hasn't made a single purchase commitment. And if we're going to move those beans in November through April, we need to start seeing those commitments come in right now. And I think that's really what's weighing on the farm economy at this point. That's why we're not seeing those bids. That's why you're seeing basis that's pretty weak because they're not in the market. And if they were in the market, things would look a lot different.
So is it possible for China to get all they need from Brazil or outside of the U.S.?
So one of our analysts, Mark Rosenbaum, has been crunching the numbers on that at Terrain, and you look at what USDA reports that the Chinese have in stock. Their stocks to use level is, I believe, historically high, somewhere around 36%. So it is feasible to think that they could get everything they need by drawing down their stocks and then purchasing from Brazil. They can't do that very long, though, maybe just for this crop. And then the risk becomes, what happens if there's a weather event in Brazil? What happens when you've drawn down your stocks? So they can play this game, but not for very long.
Tractor demo will start in 15 minutes in the RDO demo field.
I'm going to go
Everybody
there.
get that? We're going to have demos going on soon. So talk to me about China itself. What was it, a week or so back, Xi was hosting all the world leaders, it seemed like. We had all the BRIC nations in play. We had Putin was there, and we had the Brazilian president was there, India. I think South Korea even showed up for a picture at one point. So what does that say about what China's trying to do in putting its face out there on the world stage?
I think if you think about it, in the United States, we're running for Congress every 2 years, Senate's every 4 years, the White House is, or Senate's I think every 6 years, the White House is every 4 years. In China, they're playing a much longer game. There's no election that Xi's going to have to go to. So their strategy can be a little bit different than what our strategy is here at home. But in my opinion, I don't think there's anywhere else you'd want to put your money than here in the United States. So they can stand up a BRICS, but I don't think anyone would want to put their money in their long-term future by investing in those economies.
The Trump agenda, obviously, on trade is a lot about chaos. You know, when we go into 15% tariffs, then it's going to be 115% tariffs, and back down to 30% or whatever. There's a lot of chaotic activity going on. I think maybe some leverage to keep our potential buyers off edge. It's a part of the negotiating process. Is that fair?
Well, I think just maybe yesterday he asked the European Union and other allies to put a 100% tariff on, was it the Russian and the Chinese, to try to get some sort of deal, some momentum moving in the right direction. So yeah, I mean, I think tariffs most definitely are a negotiating strategy, a means to an end, so to speak.
Could there be long-term implications? I'm old enough to go back to the embargo days, and out of that we saw Brazil become a player in this soybean and now even in the corn market. Is there some long-term consequences for the U.S. in a tariff strategy?
So I actually got an email this morning talking about coming out of that embargo era and the birth of the CRP program. And now we've got 30 million acres that we idle, a lot of that in grassland. And so could there be implications? Absolutely. I think when China is only expected to buy $9 billion of agricultural products this fiscal year, which is the lowest in 20 years, there can be implications. I think Brazil certainly saw an opportunity to grow and meet the Chinese market. But I think there's risks in Brazil too. If you're putting a lot of eggs in the Chinese basket, and look at what that's happening to us, look at what that's done to us now. So a lot of folks have talked about how do we use this as an opportunity to diversify, to reshape U.S. agriculture so that we're not so reliant on the Chinese as our largest buyer for one of our largest crops.
So the other part of the world with the conflict is Russia and Ukraine. Is China paying attention to that? Does that have any play on what's happening in the U.S. situation, moving soybeans? Is that a long stretch?
I'm certain that they're paying attention to that. They're paying attention to that for reasons related to Taiwan. I mean, everybody's watching what's happening on the world stage and watching what's happening here in the United States.
So Russia had some drone attacks last night, I believe, that went into Poland, a NATO country. Mm-hmm. What does that mean for us moving forward?
That's probably a little bit above my pay grade, but you had that happen, and then you also had the Israeli strike in Qatar that creates a challenge geopolitically for the administration to deal with. So you've been to the White House a couple times. You've had a relationship with folks on the Hill. How would you gauge some of the people that we have in the administration, whether it's USDR or Treasury, some of those people that are negotiating on our behalf? Well, and number one, we need to get the U.S. ag trade negotiator needs to get confirmed in the Senate. So that individual's not in her seat just yet. There's still a number of USDA undersecretaries that have yet to be confirmed. One of my former colleagues, he's going to be Undersecretary Hoskins, Dudley Hoskins, yet to see his confirmation hearing. But you think about all the people that are there, they do understand agriculture, understand the gravity of the jobs that they're trying to do. And then I had an opportunity to meet Secretary Rollins a few weeks ago, and she told me, she said, there's never been a Secretary of Agriculture that has had this close of a relationship with the President, and it is my goal to make agriculture great again. And I think she said the golden age for agriculture is just around the corner. So I think you have good people in good seats that are trying to do the right thing for farmers and ranchers.
I think a lot of people don't realize the role she had in the first Trump administration.
Deputy, I think she was the Domestic Policy Council, also stood up the America First Policy Institute. She's got Texas roots. One of my good friends, Dr. Bart Fisher from Texas A&M, is a close advisor to her. So she's got good people around her, advising her, helping her make good decisions. So
back to the tariff scenario, the court's looking into the president's authority to use his emergency powers to impose tariffs. Trump administration now asking for the Supreme Court, and they responded yesterday saying they would go on the fast track.
Yeah.
What surprised me, though, is the fast track meant if they expedite things, they'll take oral arguments in early November. That doesn't seem like the fast track for those of us sitting on a pile of corn and beans.
That's a pretty fast track in Washington, D.C. So, but I think we do need to get some sort of certainty on where we're going to end up on that. I mean, if you're Chairman Thompson and you're thinking about the potential of using tariff revenues to pay for some sort of bridge, you need to know where the Supreme Court's going to land on that. I think if you look at how the Supreme Court shakes out, my guess is we're going to land in the right spot there.
If it goes south and went the other direction, what would happen to the president's negotiating leverage, I guess, when we move forward?
I mean, it takes a lot of the leverage off the table. If we have the world's largest economy. If you're not using access to this economy as a negotiating tool, if you cannot do that, it certainly takes some of the leverage away.
Switching gears a bit, if we can, we talked about the basis earlier. We got a big crop that's sitting out there all across this country. A supply-demand report coming out on Friday. They're looking at last number was what 188.9, something like 8. Even a lot of the private analysts, maybe not quite that high, but still looking at a record crop. How do we chew through all that?
Well, I think that is the challenge, right? How do we move through that, and at what price do we move through that? That's always the balance, right? If you're thinking about Milo, for example, we're chewing through Milo, we're using it in ethanol, but at what price are we chewing through it? And on the corn side, 16.7 billion bushel corn crop needs to go somewhere. New crop corn exports are record high at this moment, which that's a good thing. But maybe you think about E15. How many millions of bushels could that consume if we had year-round E15? And I know that's been a big ask from the corn growers. And again, they're doing their big fly-in in Washington, D.C. next week, and I'm sure that E15 is going to be top of mind, because a lot of farmers that I've talked to, they would rather get their returns from the market. They don't want a bridge.
Right.
They want strong exports. They want strong domestic markets. And there are certain things that we can do to help.
Do you think that E15, I mean, what's been the holdup on that whole process?
I mean, it seems to always get held up in some form or fashion. I've heard the infrastructure's not yet there. I think Secretary Vilsack wanted to use the Commodity Credit Corporation to help build out the infrastructure to support year-round E15. But I think if we put our minds to it, if we think about what needs to happen from a policy perspective, a regulatory perspective, an infrastructure perspective to get there, that we can do it.
So I'm curious, with this big crop coming on, you talked about basis earlier. We lost a lot of storage across North Dakota in particular this summer with a wind event. Kind of what's your look at what's happening to the basis around the country and kind of where that scenario is sitting?
Well, I mean, with a big crop coming, storage is certainly going to be tight. One of our analysts, again, Mark Rosenbaum, ran some numbers on farm storage, off-farm storage compared to the size of the crop that's about to be harvested, looked at what was already stored on farms, and found in this part of the world it's going to be very, very tight. And so obviously, when storage is tight, when China's not buying, it's going to have a very, very negative effect on basis. It's going to limit the ability for you to wait for higher prices if you've got nowhere to move the product. It can create bottlenecks in transportation. There are a lot of implications of reduced storage capacity.
I'm looking at his chart. North Dakota, 131% of capacity on storage, 131%. It only looks like 2 states are above that, and that's Louisiana and Virginia, it looks like. I don't think they're worrying too much about their corn crop.
Well, I think actually, so I have a lot of friends down in the Delta, and what they're worried about is they don't have storage. So just like here, you're moving soybeans out of the Pacific Northwest, they're moving them out of the Gulf, and they take it right off the combine to export. And if there's no one buying, they have nowhere to put it. So they have logistical challenges as well.
So we talk about price, but the expense side of the ledger hasn't changed as well. USDA recently came out with their forecast on some of the economic side of this, those input costs. They've been holding tough. If we went through the boom and the prices all went up,
Yep.
so did the costs. When the prices came down at the corn and soybeans, we didn't see those input costs come down.
I think that's what makes this economic, there are a couple things that make this economic environment more challenging than the one we went through, say, in 2015 or even 2018, 19, and 20. And number one, input costs have gone up by 36% since 2020, and they haven't come down. We've got record input costs on replacement animals, record interest expenses, a number of categories, record labor costs. So input costs are projected at nearly $500 billion. That would, I think, record high in nominal terms, and yet commodity prices have fallen by about 30%. So that's what makes this environment, that's what makes break-even so elusive, is that there's been no relief on input costs, no relief on fertilizers. And fertilizer markets are facing production issues and tariff issues. So places where you normally look for some relief, it's not happening. The only place that you're seeing a little bit of relief in certain pockets of the country is on cash rents.
Those land values, at least in this area, maybe they've started to moderate, maybe a bit of a soft landing, but they've held firm, strong, really through this whole scenario here.
Absolutely, land values have held strong. They went up in the most recent price rally, and they still they've not started to decline year over year in any of the numbers that we've seen.
So there's also the haves and the have-nots. This cattle market has been in uncharted territory. We've backed off in the last week or so, but it sounds like futures are recovering a little bit today. Do you think we've seen the highs in that cattle market? I don't know if the fundamentals have changed dramatically.
You know, and we've got one of the best protein analysts in the country on our team, in Don Close, and he's very close to putting out his forecast. I think he's still pretty bullish on the cattle market moving into next year. But I think the concern is if these prices start to move lower with the price limits that we have on the board, they can move lower in a hurry, especially as sellers get into the market thinking that they want to capitalize on a falling market. It's like catching a falling knife. So, but we're still pretty optimistic on cattle markets. Consumer demand, it continues to be there. I think the beef price ratio to real wage growth has been positive too. So I don't think there's any big concern of any type of correction. And the herd is not rebuilding either, right? So that's the other factor. People are watching to see when we see any signs of the cattle herd growing, and we just don't see it yet.
Are you surprised we haven't seen any demand destruction with consumer prices? Even President Trump talked about beef prices over the weekend.
He's talked about beef prices a couple times, and I think he's looking at it from the perspective of inflation, from the perspective of the impact on grocery bills, not necessarily what it means to the cattle producer. I know the cattle producers are real important to this administration, but I don't think you're seeing any demand destruction from the consumer. When I went out to dinner last night, somebody asked me if I wanted chicken. I got a steak, so.
You're doing your part, and I do mine, so I appreciate that. That's pretty important. And it also been kind of different on the dairy side of things as well, is because we've seen a lot of dairy beef really going into this whole situation.
Well, and that certainly helps them. I think I saw yesterday Class 3 milk with a $17 handle. So if you're able to breed the beef, that can certainly help, the bottom line for a dairy farmer too.
What do you see as some of the issues that are kind of maybe flying under the radar that we're not paying enough attention to?
Well, I think there are a couple things. And, number one, sitting where we're sitting, there's a lot of focus on what's happening in corn and beans. But sugar prices aren't great, right? You know that. I've got a lot of colleagues out west in California, and the wine industry is doing pretty poorly, especially your lower price segments of that market. And in Canada, for example, one of our largest markets for U.S. wine exports, effectively has boycotted U.S. wine. So we used to export about $500 million of wine to Canada every single year, and it's fallen by about 96%. So can you imagine what that does to the value of farmland in California when you've got grapes building up in inventory, you've got declining profitability of tree nuts like almonds and walnuts and pistachios that Believe it or not, 70–80% of the tree nuts produced in this country are destined for India, China, Southeast Asia, and oh, by the way, we've got tariffs there. So it's more than a Midwest issue, and I think, in Washington, D.C., obviously corn and beans get a lot of the attention because of the acreage that they represent, but there are other sectors of the farm economy that are feeling the pinch for sure.
The previous Senate Ag Committee Chair, Debbie Stabenow, she seemed to speak up a lot for some of those specialty crop issues, but coming out of a state like Michigan. Is that voice still out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that voice is still out there. Maybe not from Stabenow because she's no longer in the Senate, but you've got so many farmers that come to Washington D.C. every single year to make sure that their voice is heard. And before I joined the Senate Ag Committee, I was the chief economist for the Farm Bureau for a number of years, and my good friend President Zippy Duvall would always say, you got to get outside your fence row. And that's how people know what's happening in Washington, D.C. is when farmers come to town, or when the members of Congress are back home and you go to those town hall meetings to tell them what's happening. Just this past week in Arkansas, staff from Senator Bozeman's office, I believe, Senator Cotton's office, Representative Crawford's office, maybe even the governor's office held a roundtable meeting, and they thought maybe 20, 30 farmers would show up. Do you know how many showed up? Over 400, standing room only, to talk about the tight margin environment that they're in, asking for some sort of assistance to help them until the One Big Beautiful Bill enhancements to the Farm Bill become a reality.
So Minnesota's kind of in a unique position with both Klobuchar and Craig in the ranking positions.
Yep.
What does that mean to the whole debate?
Well, I think you've got two members of the Ag Committee in your state. I don't know if in history if you've ever had one state with two ranking members of the Ag Committee. And they have an opportunity to make sure that their voice is heard, that they can help craft what Chairman Thompson and Chairman Bozeman are going to do. The pin lies with the Republicans in the House and Senate, so it's going to be up to those staffs to draft the Farm Bill, but they work closely with their counterparts in Congresswoman Craig's office and Senator Klobuchar's office. And believe it or not, the ag community in Washington, D.C. is very tight. And again, historically, it's been very, very bipartisan. So I think if we can set aside the differences that developed during the Inflation Reduction Act process, the differences that developed during the One Big Beautiful Act process, and come together, I think you can get a bipartisan Farm Bill 2.0 that every member of the committee can be proud of.
Craig has said she has a regular breakfast with Thompson, I don't know if it's twice a month or whatever it was. No staff, just one-on-one, those two, and she does speak that they've got a very good working relationship.
Oh, absolutely. And Senator Bozeman and Senator Stabenow had regular meetings. Sometimes you were lucky enough to get staff in the room, but a lot of times staff were not in the room, so they can talk about their priorities, what the work schedule looks like. In the case of Chairman Bozeman, he's talking to Senator Klobuchar about getting nominees confirmed, what hearings do we need to have, all the regular order business that a chairman has to do.
It's different in the Senate, but there's been times I've been in Washington sitting in the House Ag Committee hearing, and I look up at particularly the Democratic members of the committee, and it's folks representing Boston or New York or Chicago that have a whole different interest than we do. They're focused on nutrition, conservation. You look to the work on the One Big Beautiful Bill. Certainly got to be a lot of discussion on Medicare and SNAP programs. What does that mean for farm policy debate in those kind of arenas?
Well, I think, again, you have to have the conversation with those members of Congress and talk about the importance of these Farm Bill programs to their ability to put food on the table, their ability to produce the food to feed a hungry population. And you have to make those visits with those members of Congress so they understand what you're going through. And back in February, Chairman Thompson had the first hearing of this Congress, and he did it on the health of the farm economy, and I was able to participate as a witness. And I had several Democrat members of the House Ag Committee reach out afterwards saying, we really want to learn more about what farmers in this country are facing. can you come give us a briefing? Can you come talk about what dairy farmers in my state may be facing? So I think there's a willingness of those members who maybe aren't as close to ag, but have ag in their states or ag in their districts to want to know what their constituents are going through.
Interest rates, another situation. Obviously,
Yeah,
the president has been very focused on trying to bring interest rates down. He's very vocal with the Fed chair, Jay Powell. How do you see that maintaining the independence of the Fed versus really the way the administration is approaching it today?
Once again, you hit me with another very difficult question. I think that next Tuesday we're going to see the Fed, and I think the Fed is going to look at the data. They're going to look at the job market. They're going to look at the revision to the job market that we saw yesterday. I believe it was 910,000 jobs that they revised downward over the last 12 months or so. They're going to look at the inflation. CPI comes out tomorrow. They're going to take all those data points. At the same time, I think the Senate is rushing to get confirmed another member of that board to have a voice in the room. But I think if any macroeconomist worth their weight looks at what's happening in the job market and says we need an interest rate cut, probably closer to 25 basis points, maybe not 50 basis points. I believe the market's pricing in 3 more interest rate cuts yet this year, and I think we're going to start to see that next week.
You crunch numbers. How do we have a revision of 900,000? I mean, what does that say?
We need to hire those people at NAS so they can revise the yield numbers down a little bit. I think the job market numbers are not survey-based right away. So I think they're trying to approximate the job growth, and then once they get more hard numbers in, you see these revisions come in. And so I think that's why we had such a large revision. But when we had the last revision, this last go-round, President Trump was disappointed in these revisions and fired the BLS staff. So I don't know how
What's that mean for the next guy in that position?
You better not get your numbers wrong.
Yeah, it's a whole different world in D.C. today. How do you see this Trump 2.0 different from the first go-around?
I think this go-round, and to be completely honest with you, I think this go-round you've got more of the Republican machine that is gathered around in terms of people willing to go in and work for this administration. They were prepping for this over the last 4 years, prepping for Trump 2.0, and you've got a lot of really sharp policy experts, people that have worked on Capitol Hill that have said, I'm going to go work for this administration. And I think the first go-round, people were a little bit more reluctant because it was an unknown commodity. People bought in this time around.
So talk about staffing issues. USDA looking at what? Going from 4,600 to 2,000 some in D.C., starting 5 regional hubs across the country. I think the closest one to us would be Kansas City. Closer than D.C., but still not exactly in our backyard. What's your take on this approach and maybe some of those job cuts? You worked at USDA.
Yeah, I did work. I think it's challenging because from a personal perspective, a lot of these people. A lot of these people are, 2 working people in Washington, D.C. USDA is often a place where, 2 PhDs can find a job. And you think about people that if you've worked with for, 20 years having to relocate, potentially relocate their families. And so there's a personal element to it. At the same time, I've gone to the South Building, I don't know how many times in the last few years, and it's completely empty. And that's prime real estate right in the middle of Washington, D.C. So you've got people that aren't in the office, that are teleworking and no telling where they live around the country. So it's a difficult thing to navigate. You've got the personal lives of people, but then you've got to figure out a way to run the government more efficiently. You've got to look at our national debt, at where it's standing, and think about how can we, make some cuts to help relieve the pressure that we have there.
Is there any concern of loosening some of that institutional memory that we have in D.C.?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are, and I think you saw it even when ERS moved to Kansas City a number of years ago. You do have institutional knowledge, whether it's at the World Board, whether it's at NAS, whether it's at ERS, that you could potentially lose if people don't relocate. And I believe the last time this happened, I was at Farm Bureau the last time it happened, and they actually reached out and said, you know, what are some things that farmers and ranchers cannot live without? And how do we make sure that we don't do anything that's detrimental to our number one constituent, which is farmers and ranchers?
One thing I don't think that gets a lot of attention is the debt situation, and it does increase with the budget reconciliation bill, the one big beautiful bill. How much of an anchor is that on any of our things that we're dealing with going forward?
Well, the score of the one big beautiful bill does show from the Congressional Budget Office and other budget experts that it does increase the deficit. I think the counter argument that some have made is they're not taking into consideration the revenues that could potentially be generated with maintaining the tax policies that we had under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. But you have to find a way to reduce the deficit. You have to find a way to lower interest rates so that paying down that near-term debt is not as expensive as it would be. And I think they're trying to balance all that, whether it's the Treasury Secretary or the White House.
It's got to be a big challenge when you got that hanging over your head moving forward. Yesterday came out with a report from the Make America Healthy Again plan. There's been a lot of feedback from the ag community after that first report. It seems like a lot of that maybe was heard in that whole process. Is that fair?
I think it's certainly fair. I think this go round, and you even heard it from Secretary Kennedy, that farmers had a seat at the table. And agriculture, I believe last time, said we just want to make sure we've got an opportunity to sit at the table, that USDA has an opportunity to sit at the table and weigh in on what is going to be in that report. And I think if you read the report, you read the findings, it's pretty clear that Secretary Rollins had a seat at the table, her staff had a seat at the table, as did farmers and ranchers, and our partners across the supply chain had a seat at the table in drafting or helping to think about elements of that report.
I think one of the concerns out of the first draft was the impact on pesticides, glyphosate, crop protection products. I haven't had a chance to read the whole report that came out yesterday, but I was told that Kennedy deferred all those questions over to the EPA administrator, so that says something.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't had a chance to read the whole report yet either, but based on how the ag groups have responded in Washington, D.C., I think they're pleased to have had a seat at the table and to weigh in and not end up issuing a report that doesn't trust the science that's got us here.
So for the farmers sitting in the room and the ones watching on video, what are some of those economic indicators that they should be paying attention to?
Well, I think farmers know all their economic indicators on their farm. I mean, they know not only the price that they see every day, they know what's happening in their fields. They're as tuned in as anybody on what's happening out there. I like to pay attention to, some of the supply and demand, the fundamentals, so to speak. Before I went to Washington, D.C., I was a professor at the University of Illinois, and I was there with a great mentor and advisor, Dr. Darrell Good, who was on the Farm Doc Daily team. You've probably interviewed Darrell Good many times. He always told me to pay attention to the fundamentals, pay attention to demand and the ethanol crush, pay attention to the export markets, and that's what I always go back to. Is just looking at the fundamentals. I don't follow the technicals as much as maybe some do. I look at where are the fundamentals, where are the supply and demand conditions right now.
Are there things in the outside markets with the general economy that they should look at? I mean, I think in gold, we're at all-time highs in the gold price, I think, here in the past week. Mm-hmm. What's that say for the economy when we're looking at that really as a safe haven kind of commodity?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pay attention to the the jobs numbers, the CPI numbers. You pay attention to what other asset classes are doing. I look at all the BLS data that comes out. I look at all of, the information from the Kansas City Fed. I look at the Minneapolis Fed. So there's a lot of information from a macro perspective that we take in at Terrain, every single day. And when we're out talking with, an ag country customer or a Farm Credit Service of America customer, whoever it may be, we've crunched all of those numbers and are giving you the latest perspectives that we have.
With the volatility volatility really can be a good thing in the ag marketplace. We've been pretty stagnant in this. I guess the question is, what advice do you give farmers really with a lack of volatility in this marketplace?
Volatility does create opportunities, and I think, we're going to see the WASDE report come out on Friday this week. USDA may lower that yield number down from 188. And that may create a pricing opportunity. Knowing what your bottom line is, knowing what your cost of production is really important. And the key is not to market everything at one time. And I think everybody in this room knows this, but to market throughout the year. And really, the farther out that you try to market, a lot of times you're going to end up with a better price if you're further out. If you're trying to market near term, you end up exposing yourself to a lot more volatility. But at the end of the day, there's a cost to reducing volatility. So I think farmers sometimes look at, did I miss out on selling at a higher price? But what you've done is you've smoothed out your income stream by marketing, forward selling, using risk management tools. But often that does come at some sort of cost.
John, you represent Terrain. Educate me on what Terrain is. I think a lot of people probably have the question mark.
The way I like to think about it is farm credit, right? We have 4 farm credit associations that have pooled their resources to say, we want to have, a team of economists that can go out and visit with our customers and tell them what they're seeing in the market. And that's what Terrain is. It's, we have American Ag Credit, which is out west in California, New Mexico, Colorado, and that's where we have 2 economists that focus almost exclusively on what's happening in California, in the wine industry, in the specialty crop industry, in the tree nut industry. We have, 2 of the best protein economists in the country. So when we go out and talk to, one of our cattle feeding customers, we can bring an analyst that's, tracking everything that's happening in the beef market, the cattle market, the fetal cattle market. We've got a number of grain economists. We've got a swine market economist. We have 2 macro economists on the team. And I don't think the Farm Credit really ever had that. What you actually had was all the various associations had an analyst, but they didn't bring it all together. And so you had one analyst in one office trying to focus on a number of different issues. And now we're pooling our resources to provide a better product to the Farm Credit customers. That's how I like to think of Terrain.
From a reporter standpoint, you pump out a lot of great information for us to utilize. How does the Farm Credit utilize that?
So it's all the content that we publish is on terrainag.com. It's also on our partner Farm Credit website. So if you go to Ag Country under resources, you can get all the content that we publish there. But one of the exclusive benefits of Terrain is not only the content and the analysis that we put out there, but our analysts come to you. We have an analyst right now down at Husker Harvest talking to people. I was up here back in February up in Thief River Falls, Minnesota. It was cold in February in Thief River, by the way. And the hotel I stayed in, I'm pretty sure had all the air came into my room. I'm from Kentucky. I wasn't used to that. But I came and we had 30 or 40 Ag Country farmers in the Black Cat Bar and Restaurant to talk about what we're seeing in commodity markets. That's the benefit is we come to you. The analysts will come to the farm. They'll come to the shop and talk to you, talk to your friends about what they're seeing in the marketplace. We're so proud to do that, and we're lucky to be able to do that.
This world's moving pretty fast. Information becomes a pretty important commodity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, we're tracking all the information every single day. You know, our analysts are going to look at the WASDE and immediately think, what does this mean for our farmers, for our customers that we work with, our farmer owners? How can they process this information to make better and more informed business decisions for their farm?
John, what would be a take-home message for these folks as they make their way around the show today?
I'd love to just visit with people after we're done to talk to people. One of the things I love the most about this job and the job I had working on the Hill and even working at Farm Bureau was just to hear from people what they're seeing, what their challenges are, and try to figure out is there any way that what we're doing at Terrain can help.
Well, we appreciate having you make the trip and being with us at Big Iron. Probably a little chillier than what you would have if you were at a Husker Harvest, I don't know. But please show your appreciation for John for making the trip and being here.
Thank you, Don, I appreciate it.
John Newton from Terrain. Again, keep in mind, all of our programs are streamed online. You can go to our YouTube channel or yourliveevent.com and follow any of the forums that we have going on at Big Iron. Folks from Ag Country actually have a session explaining some of the changes in crop insurance. And then at 1:30, we've got a market outlook panel. We've got Randy Martinson, Brian Doherty, and Christy Van On will be on the stage at 1:30. Thanks.
It's all about nutrient efficiency, right?
Exactly.
I've taught you all the things that you know.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
I'm Sherry Cook. I'm passionate about helping farmers with crop nutrition, and I'm here to help you with your operation.